A Ravnica guild headed by a demon lord. What could go wrong? Greetings, hatchlings. We are here to talk about a brand new card from Ravnica Allegiance. Now, obviously, the way I like to do it, I like to give you all the flavor leading up to it. And this is actually the third iteration we're going to be looking at of Rakdos. So let's talk about Rakdos and Rakdos, because when you say Rakdos, you could either mean Rakdos or Rakdos. Now, instead of just doing that over and over, which is funny to me, I'm going to actually explain to you what I mean. You've got Rakdos. That's what they end up as, Rakdos. I like that. Anyways, you've got Rakdos the Guild, and you've got Rakdos the Demon Lord, all right? Now, Rakdos the Demon Lord presides over Rakdos the Guild. And there are obviously 10 guilds on Ravnica, all headed over by some Perun, whatever you want to call it. Although the parents might just be the names for the original ones. I don't know if they actually call the newer leaders. I don't know if they use that or if that's now an archaic term on Ravnica, and it's literally only used for the founding fathers of the guilds, because not all the guilds are still led by the creators of the guild. Now, the interesting thing about Rakdos is Rakdos was included in the guild pact as the leader of one of the guilds, mainly in the hopes that it would keep him out of trouble and that he wouldn't cause as much havoc in the city. Literally, they just thought, hey, you know what? We'll include the demon here in the guild pact, and oh, please let this work out well for us. That's pretty much what it was, just a hope and a dream, baby. So, Rakdos Guild is formed around a demon. And what do you get when you have a guild formed around a demon? Well, you get crazy chaos and insanity. Now, Rakdos has had different positions in the guild. I mean, he's always been the parent of the guild, but in terms of his interactions with the guild and how things went, it started out a little different. At the beginning, when we first see Rakdos show up in the very first, when we first see the Rakdos Guild show up in the first Ravnica set, Rakdos the Demon, gotta make sure to distinguish, Rakdos the Demon is actually asleep. He sleeps in a fiery pit of lava, essentially. So he was mostly asleep most of the time. He had somebody else running the guild called Isolde. Now, Isolde had a plan to actually awaken Rakdos and bring him full front out into the world. Let's have him around all the time. But she wanted to do it under her control. So her plan was actually to inject him with draconic cerebral fluid. So basically like brain essence from dragons is what was going to be infused into Rakdos in an attempt to wake him and bring him under her control. Now, unbeknownst to Isolde, Momir Vig, who of Simic fame, in fact, if you haven't seen it already, yesterday's video, we talked about this. We talked about the Simic and how they started out with Momir Vig going crazy and leading the guild down the wrong path, and how they're continuing down that path now after trying a course correction. So that's an excellent video. But anyways, Momir Vig was essentially planning to allow Isolde to waken Rakdos using this cerebral fluid from dragons, and then he was going to use Experiment Kraj to take out Rakdos. That was originally his plan. Now, obviously, none of that came to fruition. It didn't work out at all. And in fact, Isolde ended up being weakened as a result of the entire power struggle and everything like that. And the rest of the cult of Rakdos just tore her to pieces. They ripped her apart and fed upon her flesh, because the cult of Rakdos is insane. And you know what else is crazy about the cult of Rakdos, the Rakdos Guild, is they're the guild of entertainers. And I really, really like the flavor behind this, because the idea is they're the guild of entertainers, and who is hardest in the world to entertain? Just a jaded, bitter demon lord. So the highest mark of honor amongst Rakdos is to actually have entertained Rakdos himself. And so they go to any length. They're a very hedonistic guild where they just have a go at each other. There's all kinds of inter-violence happening with the guild. It's really unruly. There's a lot of turnover in the ranks, not because people are leaving the guild, because they're being forcibly removed from existence by people wiping them out. So, Rakdos has actually existed in 3 different cards. The first card we're going to look at, which is Rakdos the Defiler, this is him when he was mostly asleep for most of the time in the lava pit. So you get 2 red, 2 black, and 2 colorless. You get a 7/6 flying trampler. Whenever he attacks, you sacrifice half the non-demon permanents you control rounded up. And whenever he deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices half the non-demon permanents he or she controls rounded up. Now, it's got a very Rakdos feel to it. He lays waste to his own guild. He would destroy people on a whim. Honestly, he'll be entertained by somebody, and the next moment, he'll set them on fire. Just boom. Oh, you know what? Now it's entertaining to watch you burn. That's literally Rakdos' style. He's a maniac. He's a maniac, maniac demon lord. And he's burning all the dumb Rakdos toast. Raktoast. All right. Anyhow, let's take a look at the artwork on this because it's actually really nice. Honestly, he's got like a big beefy demon body. He's got the flame whip action going on where he kind of feels like like the Balrog from Lord of the Rings, if you get my feel in there. He's got this crazy scythe that has flame, and it's attached to chains that are wrapped around his body. It's absolutely intense, honestly. It definitely feels like a massive demon lord, which is what you want. Obviously, if you're gonna have like the king daddy of Rakdos demons, you want him to look the part. And he is definitely up to it. So you've got him standing there wreathed in fire. There's flames all around him. I like the fact that he's standing there like with the flames, but you can actually see people charging up to him on either side. You can see people behind him who are probably following him, his followers, and you can see in front of him some poor lone fool who's about to get it, who might actually be part of the Rakdos cult too, considering the weapons that they have. The Rakdos favor impractical weapons. They like spectacle weapons and grisly weapons. So truthfully, this may actually just be him surrounded by his cult, but everything is on fire. At first, it makes it look like he's in a lava pit, truthfully. But when you look at the bigger artwork, you can see he's standing somewhere where is it water pouring from the ceiling? What is pouring from the ceilings from those crazy pillars? It's kind of hard to tell. It's pretty interesting though. A lot of the artwork's obscured. He's got a really crazy mouth. He's got 2 sets of horns. So he's got the ones that go out, but he's also got the ones down here for ramming. And that crazy sickle that he's holding looks to be made out of some kind of like lava rock, maybe obsidian. He's got all the chains hanging off him. And Rakdos, and he's got like that loincloth that's all just kind of wild and unruly. Rakdos' gear, a lot of even the Rakdos Guild's gear, is geared to hurt their opponents. Like, okay, I've got crazy spikes all over me and stuff, and it's not so much for protection as just causing carnage, the maximum amount of carnage. So I definitely really enjoy the artwork for Rakdos. Now, the problem I've always had with this card is I don't feel like sacrificing half my permanents. You got to sacrifice half your permanents and hope you'll connect with them. And that only makes it even in terms of what's going on. So, I mean, the fact that he doesn't make you sacrifice demons protects himself from it, but it also means you can't get rid of him using it. So there is that balance to it. Now, when they came back, it's like Rakdos always has some kind of negative to him, it appears. At least with the first one and the second one. The third one, we'll have to wait and see. So, for the second Rakdos, we have 2 black and 2 red. He is actually, sorry, let's take a quick moment to talk about what happened at this point. At this point, he is no longer asleep all the time. This is when he's awoken and taking control of the guild. So he is around, he is aware, he's no longer in a torpor, letting other people run the guild. Although most of the guild's activities are handled by ringleaders, and the ringleaders report to Rakdos. And you only get to rule as long as you're strong. They're always looking for weak spots to take down the leaders, and there'll be new ringleaders coming up. And there's not actually a set number of rings of Rakdos. It can change depending on all kinds of things. The mood of Rakdos the demon himself, where he just feels like, all right, I'm going to wipe out this ring, or just the natural ebb and flow of the Rakdos cult, because it attracts a lot of crazy people and they do a lot of crazy things. So the ranks are always going up and down in the amount of people who are part of the guild, just by the very inherent terrible nature of the guild itself. Now, the Rakdos Lord of Riots, which is when he's awake, is 2 red, 2 black for a 6/6 flying trample demon. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. That's all upside, but the downside is you can't cast Rakdos Lord of Riots unless an opponent lost life this turn. Now, I like that. It really evokes the concept of like a sacrifice to bring about a demon. It's got a very good demon feel to it. I like the fact that he is still really, really beefy. Sure, he's not 7'6", but he is 6'6" flying trample. And that is something to be feared. And I like the fact that he's cheap. He's only 4 mana to put out. That's really cheap for a Demon Lord. All you need to do is have spilled a bit of your opponent's blood, and you will get to summon up Rakdos. It's got a really great demonic feel to it. And they actually, in the same set, because this is the Return to Ravnica version, right? In the same set, they actually have the card called Rakdos' Return. Now, this is 1 red, 1 black, and X. It's a sorcery that deals X damage to target opponent. That player discards X cards. When Lord Rakdos stirred from his slumber, everyone else's nightmare began. So you can see, this is where he has awoken from his slumber. He is now enacting vengeance upon just everything. Why not? You know what? I'm going to smash up Ravnica. Anybody who gets in my way, my cult members, my enemies, I don't even care. Everybody's getting some. But the card itself is really, really solid, in all honesty. I mean, you do X damage to your opponent and you make them discard their cards too. So this has a very demonic feel to it in terms of get hurt, and it racks your mind with demonic anguish as well. All of it just comes together very, very well to create a perfect little package there. In terms of the artwork, you can see Rakdos is on a rampage here. He is totally just flying through a bunch of, it's a little hard to make out here. Let me see if the artwork will expand itself, because normally when I'm doing this, the artwork will expand itself nice and easy, but for some reason right now, it wants to tease me. Of course, that's what's gonna happen. Right when I wanna get into the artwork, we're gonna have an issue with the internet. So let's hope that it comes back while I'm talking, and it did, hooray! Okay, so, yep, definitely worth it to look at the enhanced artwork, because this is really intense. You've got Rakdos, and he's actually got some like flame magic trailing up off the top of his head. He's still got the same setup with the horns and everything. Physically, he hasn't changed. He's got all the chains hanging down from his loincloth, but you can actually see that he is obviously in a Rakdos chamber here. That's what it has to be. There's no way that this is anything else. You can see the pillar in front of him there actually has skulls with lava dripping out of it. There's fire everywhere. This is actually probably him rising up out of the fiery pit in which he slept. So for me, that's fantastic. And look at his wings too, with the holes that are like, he's got these kind of, some ways, raggedy wings that kind of add to his age. And he's got that chain necklace. Totally worth the extra time that it took to load that artwork, in all honesty. Worth the time, my friends, worth the time. So now, at this point, we're going to take a look at the actual spoiler card itself, which is pretty potent, honestly. This is the first time they've made a Rakdos that doesn't have a negative, and this is nice. So, 1 red, 1 black, 4 colorless. He's a 6/6 flying trampler, just like before. When Rakdos, the showstopper, enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each creature that isn't a demon, devil, or imp. Destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. That is really, really neat. And the flavor text, entertain me. So good. His entertainment is always going to be just truly brutal, just by Rakdos' nature. So I really like that. It's just like, all right, I like the fact that you get to do a bunch of coin flips, which is fun. I did another video recently talking about win conditions, and one of the win conditions in their chance encounter would go very nicely with this. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, head on back through the playlist, and after you're done watching the Simic one we talked about earlier, go ahead and check out the WinCon video, because that will explain to you what chance encounter is and how amazingly it will combine with Rakdos the Showstopper. Because really, honestly, you could get a chance encounter to WinCon like that with this card. But I like the fact that he flips a coin about wiping out everybody who's not a demon, devil, or imp. If you're a demon, devil, or imp, Rakdos is cool with you. Anybody else, friend or foe, he might just go, burn. And that is epic to me. And he looks really, really, really intense in this artwork. You can see the carnage of all these bodies, what's left of them at least, strewn about, where he has just laid waste to them. He's got this massive scythe with a flame head. He's got a corona of flame just arcing up off his head. His big wings are up like that. You can see that he's actually been restored. He doesn't have the same holes in his wings now. So he's more whole and powerful than before, and he doesn't require any kind of sacrifice to bring him out. He has no downside. He's literally all upside, except, I mean, theoretically, you could consider the fact you have to coin flip for your other guys' downsides, depending on how you built your deck. But to me, this is the first Rakdos without any real downside, and I absolutely love that he heads the Guild of Entertainment and the concept of entertain me. It's so good. So we've got a few other cards that help to illustrate the flavor of Rakdos, and it ties into all of them, which is why I left it for the end, because it really didn't matter. They didn't need to be interspersed. The first is Cackling Flames, and this is from Dissension. Now, it's 1 red and 3 colorless. It's an instant. It deals 3 damage to target creature or player, but it's got Hellbent, which was one of the older Rakdos abilities. And under the Hellbent condition, it deals 5 damage to a creature or player instead if you have no cards in your hand. So basically, the old Hellbent concept was with Rakdos, you go all or nothing, and you just, boom, blow your entire load just going, Wagah! Burn, destroy everything! Like the Rakdos Guild is very much just hedonistic, exuberance, and massive violence. That's basically what it turns into. And the flavor text on it is amazing. I like a little entertainment with my dinner. From Rakdos, of course. So good. So it's honestly, this card really encapsulates the concept of Rakdos, the demon itself, very, very well. The entire idea of like, I'd like to be entertained and I'm cooking my meal at the same time. And the flames in this artwork are crazy because you don't normally see something like this. You've got a soldier who I assume is a member of the Azorius, right? And you've got him holding up a shield there, and you can see like almost what's like a little pinpoint fire tornado coming in sideways and slamming into the shield. But then from another direction, you can see this cackling flame that's swirling around and coming down over top of him. And there's all these demon and imp faces that are actually in the flame. It's like it's cackling flame. The flames are literally laughing at you. Rakdos is literally mocking you while he destroys you. He likes to be entertained by it. He likes the chuckles, and then he will eat you as a nice cooked morsel afterwards. The flavor on it is absolutely next level. Then we've got Psychotic Fury. That's 1 red and 1 colorless. It's an instant. Target multicolored creature gains double strike until end of turn. Ton of multicolored creatures in the Rakdos Guild, obviously. You get to draw a card when you play it. And the flavor text says, Rage, my servants. Our ancient power is renewed in blood. Rakdos. That's a decree if you've ever heard one from a demon. I mean, literally, that one, I'm going to read that again. Rage, my servants. Our ancient power is renewed in blood. And the artwork is so very, very red. Like, it's all just anger and red. You've got this giant ogre who's just screaming out his rage, lurching forward. You've got like I don't know if it's supposed to be a pillar or if it's just like, it's actually just red energy coming up off of his claw. But he looks so intense. He looks so angry and powerful. It's a really epic look, honestly. This card is a win. And the final card we have to talk about here that illustrates Rakdos and what he's all about is Rakdos Guildgate. Now, this is the gate. We talked about these before. These are the 10 key focal points of power for the Dragon's Maze, so they have significance from the past as well, but they keep bringing them back in Ravnica sets. Makes perfect sense. So it enters the battlefield tapped. It adds a black or a red mana. The flavor text says, my servants take pains for your pleasure and take pleasure in your pain. That's a pretty good way to summarize the Rakdos Guild to me. And when you look at the artwork, man, it totally looks like a Hellforge. It looks like this could literally be the gates of hell. But the interesting thing that I like is you look at just the Rakdos symbol, and it looks very skullish. It looks like the gates to hell. But look around the edges, guys. You've got what almost looks like a Disney castle. If you look at the spires and minarets behind it, it's got a Disney castle kind of feel to it. They don't look scary. They don't look intense. Yes, they are cloaked in that red sort of heat energy. But if you look at them, it really does. Just put your thumb over the part of the screen where it shows the middle and just look at the sides. And you will see that it does have like a whimsical Disney castle feel to it, which I really think encapsulates the concept of Rakdos as entertainers. So they've got it's like an entertainment complex. It's like a pleasure and pain palace with heavy emphasis on the pain. And I enjoy that the artwork is really red and black. And you can see a bunch of people traveling down the bridge towards it. They know what they're heading for. See, the Rakdos is a dangerous